the human mind power. The power of the human mind is unimaginable, enormous, powerful, and practically unfathomable. It is possible to dispute it, but it cannot, must not, and should not be ignored. This is the main reason for the fear of this power and this frenzy for controlling the human mind. Everything that we see around us and that we can imagine was created and is being created by the human mind. For millennia, it has been believed that everything with eyes, even non-functional ones, has a soul. However, what the soul is cannot be proven scientifically, so it cannot be disputed in accordance with the true scientific method. The history of modern science shows that in accordance with certain interests, what cannot be proven is declared non-existent. It is absolutely wrong from a proper scientific point of view. It should be formulated as unprovable, not as non-existent. What should be the label for a science in which there is no soul? We have no choice but to name it soulless and heartless. Now, it is important not to identify true science with all those who inappropriately put it into practice. There are those who dictate wrong attitudes to it in accordance with their own selfish interests. Some others are operationally in charge of not allowing science to get on the right track. It is not illogical to wonder who is interested in such a thing. By that analogy, we can also ask in whose interest are various organized activities against the common interests of humanity. It is obvious that there are levels of power that do not have a sufficiently developed humanitarian consciousness. It is part of the development of our species as well. And this is where the responsibility of every rational person comes into play. In biology, it is known that fertilization between individuals whose predictable traits are undesirable is not allowed in the further spread of offspring. The predictability is based on the characteristics of those to which the further mechanism of intention, fertilization, pregnancy, and childbirth refers as the basic parts of the cycle of maintenance of the species. In accordance with that principle, we all have to stop, calm down, imagine, and ask ourselves something very important. What is more valuable in every respect? Whether the belief, and that means the commitment of the broadest masses for common goals, or the belief and commitment of a certain minority that has seized great power only in terms of personal, selfish benefit, and only, therefore, considers that these are the only criteria of taste, the right path to the future. At the level of human community existence, science should be apolitical. Unfortunately, not all science is sufficiently objective in this sense. Very often, depending on the views of the financiers, it is practically pseudo-scientific because it does not allow public and open debates on these topics. It divides things and phenomena according to functionality based on certain desirable criteria, and not because these divisions are scientifically essential. Real science should approach this like everything else, carefully, patiently, thoroughly, and impartially. From the life of each person, it can be clearly seen that what should be and what is are not the same. So what is it that should be? That question is more than serious. Again, it is one thing what should be, in the opinion of the vast majority of humanity, that should be the priority, while everything else is secondary. That is why the concept of human rights was created. The mechanisms of negotiation and compliance with agreements, as well as the necessity of legal consequences for non-compliance with priorities. Substitution of theses must not be allowed. The priority cannot be anything other than the first. Of course, the concept of rights is inseparable from obligations, but also from the human understanding of the value system through customs of belief, personal convictions, and responsibility for taken positions. In today's science, even where they exist, there are not uniform views and attitudes in relation to the standardization of the terms soul, mind, body, and spirit. It is simply necessary to set essential parameters for the mentioned concepts from the viewpoint of, first of all, logic as science, philosophy, and metaphysics, as well as everyday life. In communication in general, and especially in areas essential to our existence, significant problems can arise when it is thought that something is known only because it is taken for granted by the masses, but in reality, it is unclear, undefined, incomplete, or incorrect. For this reason, it is good to think about the following display. The mind is the mediator between the soul and the body as its creation through that same mind. The body can be material, but immaterial components of being exist at the same time. When the immaterial components are permanently separated from the physical body, that remnant that was a body is no longer called as previously, but a corpse. When the soul expresses itself in the body, which can also take place in incarnation, that being behavior in a physically material body or flesh gets expressed as one's spirit. It is not a term synonymous with a ghost that does not have a physical material body, but only an energetic one. The body implies an organized structure. This is also the reason for the appearance of the material body based on the matrix or structure of the organized energy body. All this is done by the mind as the operator of all actions. Since the mind first appears as a creation of the soul in need of its expression, it is represented by that boundless, direct-indirect force of change, separation, fusion, and creation. Thus, the mind as a concept nevertheless represents a function itself, as an expression of the soul in the form of an operative principle. Because of this, the mind, according to the state, needs, experience, and maturity of the soul, can move through all dimensions and thus transform in accordance with one's capabilities, abilities, intentions, and circumstances. For the rational part of the conscious mind to better orient itself and understand the essential components and mechanisms of reality, it needs to be mapped in a certain way. That is, everything beyond the conceivable can be added to certain categories representing a system without the rest. Throughout known history, there have been numerous ways to mind mapping. Such, but fundamental one, is the theory of the four elements of ancient times, understood in various ways, and even today, in various versions, up to the nowadays trinicore, fundamental theory, or the theory of the thrine essence. According to records, its roots go back to ancient Persia, from the time of the legendary sage Zarathustra, 6th century BC, where the theory of four elements represented society's essential and religious foundations, transferred to ancient Greece and published by Empedocles as his own. 5th century BC, it was accepted as the basis of all science. Transformed by their understandings, it lasted until the 18th century AD and was abolished from official science for various reasons, debates, and heavy misunderstandings. Even today, it is present everywhere. Thus, speaking of the soul, its existence is beyond the possibility of detection because it belongs to infinity, from which it is expressed indirectly through life in this reality. Infinity can be big or small, and the view of the finitude dynamics makes a difference depending on whether it is viewed from the inside or from the outside. That is why the soul and its properties cannot be sufficiently and reliably said in a clear, even at the highest level of language, because infinity is indescribable, whether large or small. However, the experience of the soul existence is so clear, but nevertheless indescribable, that is eventually the case for the essence of anything, even love and God himself. To conclude, not that science is incapable of explaining the very existence of the soul as an essence, but the correct view is that science is incapable of explaining the essence of anything. Nevertheless, technology enables us to achieve certain goals, many of which do not always align with humanity. In this light, most behave like spoiled consumers. There are some fundamentals that should be respected and advocated for, even at the cost of life. Because a life without respect for human rights is not a life worthy of human. Every person has and should have the right to express her own opinion without endangering the safety of others. People see a dose of humor in everything, even in difficult conditions. As the saying goes, urge changes the law. In particular, a great urge. Considering the overall situation in the world, most will agree that the current state of humanity is a great urge to unload undesired. As all reasonable people agree, this is a dramatic situation requiring urgent, correct, joint and impartial action. The historically proven problem of similar situations is that it is unsolvable at the level of the basic polarity because it exclusively strives for dominance at any cost, and balance is only a backward-looking moment. At the level of that basic polarity, each side would like to get rid of the other side, and in the case of submission, there is no end to the pressures. That is precisely why, after long and exhausting conflicts, battles and wars, negotiations were approached in order to avoid total destruction, and Pyrrhic victory is not a solution for anyone. The goal is to understand, as soon as possible, that negotiations and compromises are necessary within the acceptable framework. If one side prevails, it only comes to the fore of showing the spirit level. In principle, either the totalitarianism of tyranny arises or the opening of more cultural solutions, involving everyone in the management of a society, which does not mean that any and anyone's decisions are respected. The decision-making process in the spirit of humanity shows the essential strength of the human mind by which it rose above the animal nature of its body.